everybody. This is Thaddaus Dawson with the 10KMA, 10KBA podcast. Today we have a really exciting guest and actually one of the most important guests that we had. We might not be here today if not for this guest. He started this whole movement or journey that we find ourselves on here in 2025 from a situation that he had refinances a piece of property in Cincinnati, Ohio, back in 2022, I believe it was. Um, Today it'll be myself, Thaddaus Dawson, my co-host, Miss Shawnee Alridge, and our guest from Cincinnati, Ohio, my hometown, Mr. Terry Horton. Grateful and thankful to have him on our podcast today. Before I forget, if you could like, share, and subscribe, we will be forever grateful. We have a lot of really good things coming up that we will be doing and a lot of other things that we will be sharing. We got a pretty active calendar coming up and about to get into our traveling season, taking the show back on the road. Looking forward to it. Next week we will be in, I believe, Charlotte, North Carolina, with the Black Farmers Alliance. And then in March, we will be doing a class in Atlanta with the Atlanta Land Trust and Pinnacle Bank on how to appraise land trust properties for the Atlanta Land Trust, utilizing a hypothetical condition and an extraordinary assumption for their valuation for affordable housing. And we will be doing a series coming up in Atlanta at the Clayton County Library starting on March the 22nd. We'll have a 4-week series there hosting a number of classes. The first one will be heirs property training. The second will be reconsideration of value. The third one will be how to become an appraiser through our appraisal apprenticeship program and appraisal academy. And the fourth one will be on urban agriculture and small farms. And so we're really excited. And at the end of, I think, March 29th, we'll be in Mississippi at the Mississippi Minority Farmers Alliance. So we have a really robust schedule. And without further ado, I'm going to get to Mr. Terry Horton. Terry, thank you for coming on the podcast. If you could just share with our audience the why you called us initially in 2022 and you were refinancing a piece of property and the situation surrounding that and what happened and basically um, what has gone on and transpired with since and where you are with that project.
Yes, thanks for having me, Thad. It's funny to look back how far we've come since our initial interaction about what transpired with me trying to refinance one of my properties in Cincinnati. What happened was back in February of 2022, I was trying to refinance a property that I had to create some finances for another property and project that I was trying to do. And so I have been looking around in the area, the market was booming, interest rates were low, and it just seemed like an ideal time to refinance it. At least that's what the consensus were saying. And so I looked into it and I looked around my surrounding areas and I said, I'm gonna try to refinance. So I reached out to a bank and they gave me a verbal appraisal over the phone, which made me initiate the appraisal. They quoted me a price what they thought that my building was worth. So I went ahead and
They didn't
applied.
give you a verbal appraisal. They gave you a verbal value. They
A,
they did it. They did an
right,
S. We constantly argue. with people talking about, well, it just appraised. I just had it appraised. I just had a situation last week, not to cut you off, but I had somebody arguing with me because they had done some improvements to their property. And so they did $100,000 worth of improvements. And then once we did the appraisal, it came in with whatever his estimate originally was. And so the argument was, well, you telling me this $100,000 I spent on improvements wasn't worth nothing. I might as well not have done anything. And I just got an appraisal done. And so I said, my point was, sir, if you provide us with the appraisal, we're more than happy to take a look at it. And well, I didn't really get an appraisal. What I had got was from Zillow, and Zillow, I was like, well, that we arguing. You said you got an appraisal, and you didn't get an appraisal. So what you got was an so not. I'm not saying that you didn't get an appraisal, but I don't think they gave you a verbal appraisal. They ran an estimate from Zillow and told you what they thought it was worth. So I just want to be clear about what you had when you started.
Right, right. Well, they told me what they estimated the value might possibly be.
It might possibly. Way to clean it up, Terry.
Right. So I said, okay. So they sent out an appraiser, and he came out and he did the appraisal, and I was waiting for the response, and then they sent me a response, and it was $150,000, roughly $150,000 under what the estimate they had quoted me first. And so I started to look over the appraisal because I was wondering how could it be so far off. Then I started to look at it, and I noticed there were some errors on it. They had not quoted some of the rents, and the square footage was off. So I said, well, they apparently made some mistakes. Let me let them know what I found, and maybe that can adjust. That could be what the difference was. And so when I submitted it back to them and told them what I found, they agreed that there were some differences, but they said they weren't going to change the evaluation. And I was thinking to myself, like, it's got to change because it's not the same thing that we both originally was looking at. And so I was perplexed about the situation. And, you typically you look for the experts to give you some guidance. And so when I was talking to them, and that's the guidance they gave me, and I knew it was off, it's just something that you just feel like you don't know where to turn because you went to the people that's supposed to be looking out for you. And it was just clear that they weren't looking out for my interest, and I didn't understand why.
Well, I believe that was right around when you had reached out to me, and they had offered you had a reconsideration of value form, and we helped you to articulate the reconsideration of value argument. And I was thankful that you reached out to me. Of course, I've been in Atlanta probably at that time 15 years, but prior to that, I've been appraising in Cincinnati for the last 30 years. So I was intimately familiar with the ins and outs, and we were able to help you to articulate the argument for the reconsideration of value. And I've been doing a lot of work in that space across the country with the National Community Reinvestment Coalition. So once we looked at that and I saw how they were treating you on that, and they basically were just ignoring you, we submitted that to the National Community Reinvestment Coalition, and they then picked up the case and got involved. And then from there, they engaged some other appraisers, because when we're in this space, my whole thing is to make sure that people are being treated fairly and accurately. But like I talked about in the case prior to, just a couple of weeks ago, somebody felt like their property was undervalued based on them getting an estimate from Zillow and confusing that with an appraisal and thinking that the improvements that they had made had a contributory value that really didn't have. So we're able to bridge that gap, separate the emotions from the facts. And because I had been doing so much work with the National Community Reinvestment Coalition, this kind of fell in my wheelhouse. But in order to make sure that it was not just me, they engaged probably two to three other appraisers in the space, and I was kind of removed from it at that point, which was okay by me. The main thing is that I wanted to make sure that you were being heard, and I'd seen this happen all across the country. And for me, working with you, even though I had been doing it before, it kind of struck a chord because it was Cincinnati, because it was home, because I was so familiar with all the different things going on. Um, it was just happy to see it gain some traction and pick up around the country.
Yeah, it just shows you how important the reconsideration of value is, because I had no idea how far it was off when you sent it to Washington, D.C., and they did a forensic overview of my appraisal. I had only found the two things that stood out to me, but they found over 10 things that was wrong with it that they asked me to join in filing a lawsuit. And, those areas are areas that if you don't work in day to day, you really don't have no idea how much you could be spent in that space.
Well, that's the other thing that we found that I was happy to be able to bring value is to speak for those that don't have a voice. And this is my chosen profession, and I can speak to it from an appraisal standpoint, but I can also speak to it from a person of color and being impacted, seeing those impacts. And the biggest thing that I've seen in the space is not even discrimination, is poorly trained appraisers and not being able to do good work. But then on top of being poorly trained is being resistant to acknowledge when a mistake has been made. There's no such thing as a perfect appraisal. And in most cases, it's not the crime, but the cover up. And the issue in your case was not necessarily the appraisal, it was the fact that the appraiser ignored your request for reconsideration. The appraisal management company ignored your request for reconsideration. And the lender ignored your request for reconsideration. So all the while, the consumer has not had a voice, and it's something that's not been people's imagination. If you look at the persistent wealth gap and the loss of equity due to undervaluation, it's been a problem in the community for a long time. And just recently, it's been starting to be acknowledged. But in your case in particular, I worked for the city of Cincinnati in the real estate division for 7 years, and I administered all the appraisals for, at the time, it was neighborhood housing and conservation. And I would constantly see disparities and have these conversations over the years about the difference in the valuation for people of color. And we would get into these intellectual debates that went on. And then over the last 5 years, finally, there's been an acknowledgement there is a disparity. But the biggest part of the disparity is bad appraisal work. And the appraisal profession is outdated and constantly now it's working on some updates, but at the same time, it's the whole profession needs a makeover. And it's unfortunate that appraisers are under attack and they feel like they have been victimized, but they are victims of their own doing and by not updating their skill set and modernization. And so one of the things that we've been able to work on is data science, evidence-based, data-driven analysis, but also be able to offer the reconsideration of value for people like yourself, Terry, who don't have the ability and skill set to be able to articulate the argument. And since your case was filed in 2022, and some of the advocacy work that we've done in the space, reconsideration of value is now a reality that came to light under PAVE. Even though this current administration just disbanded PAVE, which is its right to do, it doesn't take away the progress that has been made and the reconsideration of value that now the GSEs offer, the lenders offer, the states and all the cities. You can't unspill the milk, and there needs to be an effective way of dealing with this. And I believe 10KBA has that solution, and we created this as a result of your case in this movement. And I know I keep kind of talking. Shawnee, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I wanted to ask Terry, when you received that valuation paperwork and you're looking at it, did you think immediately that it was discrimination? Or did you think, well, they just made a little tiny mistake. We'll get this resolved, no problem.
Well, originally, I didn't think. I thought that once I showed them the errors, because we all human, and they might have made a mistake or overlooked it. And when I showed them that, we could just correct it and move on. But that's what made me feel like it was discrimination, is they acknowledged that there were some errors, and they also said that we're going to stick with the evaluation that you gave us. And through this process, I was able to get data that this space right here, we've lost over $160 billion through undervaluation for minorities. And that number is staggering. And unless you really look at it, when it's done individually, it don't seem like that much. But when you looked at it collectively, that's a lot of money. And I believe it adds to the wealth gap, because, owning houses is probably the biggest purchase that you buy, and where you maintain what you're worth with. Yeah. And when they don't give you your value, you lose.
Yep. Well, that's the
Terry,
thing, because when you go back for reconsideration, you're talking to someone about, hey, this was done improperly. A lot of times they don't change it. The appraisal will not change its value. I've had it happen one time where the appraisal changed its value because it was grossly appraised wrong. So they appraised the townhome unit there for $70,000, but all the other townhomes, same condition, same size, all the same, appraised for $140,000. So I'm like, come on now. I don't know what was happening here, but this is wrong. They changed the value. It was grossly, it was obvious. It was like, come on. But that was one situation in my entire career. One where it changed.
But now it's a part of the lending process. So it's part of your disclosure packet. When you get your lending papers, they tell you about reconsideration of value. And then when you actually get your loan, when they make your loan offer, that you get a copy of your appraisal, and you can ask for a reconsideration of value at that point. Where they come up short is they don't tell you how to articulate the reconsideration of value. So if you don't do it every day, then you still don't have the proper ability to articulate the argument with the appraiser, because the appraiser has to follow USPAP guidelines. And so when you make your argument, now in your case, Terry, there were some things that were missed. And in most cases, if it isn't some factual evidence, then people don't really know how to articulate that. And they still given the responsibility back to the consumer. And that's where we are able to fill the gap, because they can't charge you for a second appraisal. However, you only get one chance at the reconsideration of value. So I think there still needs to be some work done in that process. And we are offering to be able to help people articulate the argument. Of course, we got to put a small fee on that, but it's also a part of your due diligence. And we offer those consultation services at 30-minute blocks, or we can actually articulate it for you, and you can submit it yourself. So that's where we have been able to bridge the gap. But that's with our 10KBA appraisal management service, our for-profit. And where we've been doing the training and educating is our 10KMA 10K Minority Appraisers Foundation, where we spent considerable efforts the last 2 years educating people and teaching the next generation of appraisers so we can have more inclusion, so we can have more representation into the space. It's not the solution, it's a solution, but the short term is we can have an immediate impact with the reconsideration of value. And to your point, Terry, home ownership is the second largest opportunity in building wealth for Black people. The first one is in land. So we are focusing on land and housing. And it's interesting because with our travels with the 1890 land grant colleges, we've been doing a lot of work in the rural area and in the farming segment. So now our focus and our mission in our education and training is twofold. We're impacting the two least diverse professions in the country, which are farming and appraising, and they both share similar demographics. There was over 1 million Black farmers in 1920. Today, there's less than 30,000 Black farmers. And so, not only to your point, that number you had quoted, Terry, I believe was like $160 billion. It's probably closer to $200 billion in undervaluation. Then if you add the loss of value for Black farmers, that's another $100 billion in undervaluation. And then the silent killer to Black folks in the wealth gap is heirs property. And we've been doing a lot in heirs property and the valuation for that as well. Shawnee and I have done a lot in heirs property training, and we will be touring the country with the Policy Center. We just completed a 3-hour land valuation course for heirs property training and its impact. And our last podcast before this, we did with JC out of Alabama, and she's a heirs property attorney. So there's a significant amount of loss for Black and brown people in heirs property. That's one that people don't know about or really talk about, but has a great impact on how we move forward in being able to pass wealth, and seeing how over 70% of people of color don't have an estate or don't have a will. This is something that we need to be proactive about in planning for the future.
Terry, when you were working on this project, it was a pivotal time in our economy because the rates were incredible. So it would have been a great opportunity for you to, like you said, expand your portfolio.
Yes, and this turned out to be a bigger issue than I could have ever imagined, because it seemed like at the time everybody picked up the story. The New York Times, the Justice Department got involved. We had some investigative television stories that was shown over 150 states, and it kind of went viral. Well, it had already been viral, but I guess I had just came to the party and seen that this is going on all over the country.
Well, how do you feel about dragging me and Shawnee into the party? Because we was happy in Atlanta, minding our own business. And so you drug us into the party, and then shortly after that, we got recruited to Cincinnati by 3/5 Bank to work on a project with the Cincinnati Port Authority, because they were having some issues with undervaluation with properties that they were rehabbing and improving, and the appraisals were not coming back enough to cover the improvements. And we've made some suggestions there that I believe were instrumental and helpful. But also, I believe you were refinancing in order to do a project with the Cincinnati Port Authority, if I remember correctly.
Yes, I was in negotiation with the Port Authority to buy and rehab and do some development in some lower income areas. It was a food desert. I was going to put a grocery store, some apartments there. And so the domino effect from what happened there was long standing. And it was it impacted more than just that evaluation. Because
Wow.
it robbed me from my opportunity to create generational wealth for me and my family. And there's really no substitute for that, because that's what everybody wants to try to do, you know. And when they rob you, that's what you're worth. It was essentially taking $150,000 off my property for no apparent reason.
And where
And
does that
ruining the chances for the community too. If you're trying to improve your community around you,
Right.
it ruined the community's chances to grow and thrive in that way as well.
But after your story, Terry, we started getting calls from all over the country, and that's kind of how this thing took off. And wow, I can't believe it's been 2.5 years. I think we will have 10,000 Black appraisers, and the 10,000 Minority Appraisers Foundation will be 2 years old in June. So the baby is growing up.
Right. You've been crisscrossing the country ever since. I witnessed it. It was exciting to see you grow and help so many people, and so many other people seeing what you were doing and wanted to get involved, and you could just tell how big and impactful what you do is. And I want to thank you for that, because especially for me, because you really saved me with your expertise. And for anybody that don't know what your value is, they want to be talking to you.
Well, I don't really know if I want to thank you, because my life was pretty good before this. I know my financial position was a whole lot better. I think a lot more people liked me then. I didn't realize how many people was going to dislike me for this effort or calling, or thing that you kind of pricked and got started. And I am where I am now. I feel like we're out in the middle of the ocean, and stopping is not an option. And just to be able to help and assist, I mean, just to be able to help folks like yourself. But then there's people, we've met some wonderful people all across the country. So, and Shani and I have been, we've been to Oklahoma, West Virginia, Mississippi, California,
All
Texas,
over.
Alabama, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia,
Georgia.
yeah, Georgia, Washington, D.C. Uh, thank you, Terry, for my life
Thanks,
was
Terry.
yeah, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, can we thank him enough, Shawnee?
But a whole lot more people are going to be thanking y'all, because of the work and effort that y'all do is truly amazing, and it was needed, and it just opens Pandora's box. And so now you have the whole country looking at it.
Yeah, and this is really a different time that we're in right now. So with this current administration, um, appears as though they're blowing up the government for a reset. Maybe they'll blow up the appraisal industry. It definitely could use a reset, because what's been going on has not been beneficial for us. So it may be that's where this whole thing is headed. But I do believe there still are tremendous opportunities in the profession for people to grow, but also tremendous opportunities to improve the accuracy of the valuations. And so, again, I believe it's from an outdated model that needs to have improvements, and the technology is there to be able to do it. And what I didn't realize at the time is just there's just a big vacuum in leadership in the appraisal industry. And since we have been there, I do believe we have been the leader in the industry, revolutionizing it, because just by simply looking at the number of people that copy and plagiarize our material, of course they don't give us credit or citations, but we see you. It's okay. It's almost flattering. But I'm glad to see y'all picking up what 10K is putting down. and we not gonna stop. We gonna keep it moving, and it's by God's grace. It's by no particular thing that I've done. It's just I've been in the space for a long time, and I've learned some things along the way. And when I'm speaking, I'm able to bear witness to those things to a population that hasn't been able to speak for themselves. So for that, um, I am grateful. It's like put me in my purpose. And wasn't expecting that when you called and reached out. I just called myself doing my job.
And so, can you tell a little bit about uh, your program and how you create opportunities for the youth to get involved? Because one of the things that we noticed that it was how few minorities was in the appraisal space in general. It was shocking. It was almost like no representation.
Well, this is our podcast. This ain't the Terry Horton podcast. We ask the questions.
I'm asking you for the audience.
You guys don't try to take over the show. You get your own podcast and you start having your guests and hosts on there. No, but so we had a sort of a two-pronged thing uh, to answer your question. One of our long-term goal is to educate the next generation of appraisers. And part of that was when I started, there was not a lot of people that looked like me in the space. And so, just to that point, I have been the only black commercial appraiser in Cincinnati since 1992. Let me rephrase that. I was the first black commercial appraiser in Cincinnati in 1992. And then I've lived in Atlanta for the last 18 years, as you know. And since then, there was another black appraiser, Alex Harris, who works for the city of Cincinnati, and he came after I did, but he was from Columbus and went back. But he recently came back to the city of Cincinnati. So now Cincinnati has two black commercial appraisers. Woo! But if you if you look across the country, you would think that's a low number. In some places, it's still a high number. They're still in the commercial space. There may be some residential appraisers, but those numbers are extremely low as well. And so, what we did, over 65% of all appraisers are over 50 years old, and less than 7% are under 35. And in that space, there's not 2,000 black appraisers in the country. And out of those appraisers, I would say 90% of those appraisers do residential. So they don't even get the opportunity to see some of the commercial types of properties that are out there and available. And so some of that has helped us to be able to do the rural and the farms and the agricultural type stuff just because of the base that I built while working with the city of Cincinnati in the real estate division. So that was a blessing that is just opened up so many more opportunities for me. And I wanted to open up those opportunities for other people. And one of those people were Shawnee Alridge. We worked together at the Atlanta Empire Board of Realtors, which is the oldest African American trade organization in the country. And the work that we did with the Empire Board was huge because there was a lot of giants that came through Atlanta. One of just recently died was Mr. William Roby, who was the first black appraiser in Georgia, and he died a couple of weeks short of his 105th birthday. And so to meet and learn about people like himself, um, Mr. Hamilton, um, Mr. Otis Thorpe, who was the first um, black chief appraiser for Fulton County tax assessor. I was able to get my my foundational understanding in the commercial space in Cincinnati, where I was able to build from a lot of different folks there that helped me in the industry. Um, Rick Deerdorf, that was my first appraisal job. Hank Leist at Leist Realtors, that was my first real estate broker. Um, Bob Von Bargen, he was my first commercial teacher. He was my first residential teacher at UC. He was an MAI and he was the president of Ohio chapter of the appraisal. Back then, it was the American Institute of Real Estate Appraisers. Ray Jackson, he was my first commercial appraiser teacher at the University of Cincinnati. And then just to get to Atlanta and learn the history of Black folks in the space was huge, and it propelled me to feel like I had a responsibility to help folks trying to get into the profession when there was no one there to help me. And you bringing me into your case kind of just was the catalyst for all of that. I was, like I said, pretty happy with my life and my business doing what we were doing, and things were going pretty well. Not that they aren't going well now, it's just the bigger scope and the bigger challenge. And now we are um, into implementing it in this environment, political environment, makes it even more challenging. However, it doesn't stop the mission and the necessity of what it is we have to do. Did I answer all your questions, Mr. Horton, on the Terry Horton podcast?
Yeah, I know you be tired of when you see me coming, you know he got some stuff for me. But you
But,
always there to save the day. I appreciate you.
well, again, it's been our work, and we've met some wonderful, wonderful people along the way, and working in this space now with the farming community and the need across the country and the opportunity to get back to the land. There's so much that we can do to improve our health, our quality of life, and wealth building. And to be able to work on these mixed use rural developments, doing these market analysis, creating affordable housing and affordable food is going to be incredible. The opportunities in hemp and cannabis. Um, we've learned so many different things, and in the valuation space, so many different opportunities, and being able to merge and marriage agriculture, technology, valuation um, has been huge.
So Terry, now at this point, you've gotten we're what 3 years ahead of what happened. 2022, we're in 25. What's next? Did anything happen that you see that you feel like is going to come to an end where it's going to benefit you? And so I mean, I know we can't talk a whole lot about it because things are happening, but can you give us an idea of what is looking like now? Any progress?
Well, it's hard to determine what the actual outcome is going to be because
Okay.
it's still under investigation. It's amazing
Okay.
how long these processes take when you're doing something to this magnitude. I had one of the top appraisal discrimination cases in the country.
Wow.
And I had the top coverage in New York Times, HUD, even had some interaction with some of President Biden's administration talking directly to my attorneys about this case. And so it's been a lot, and I believe that they're going to do the right thing. But what's more important to me is I hope that I can create a situation where nobody else has to go through what I went through, and everybody can be appraised fairly, and this won't have to be an issue.
Well, it has to start somewhere, we'll see. Thad and I, we do a lot of work here, boots on the ground, and we see a lot of, it's sad to say, but a lot of people are aware of this and they're nervous to get appraisals. And so now it's like people are like on high alert about their appraisal. They're thinking out the gate it's not going to be done properly. It's going to be discrimination just in general. So people, we have to work on the public and, and all that, but it'll happen in due time, I feel. But
Well,
yeah,
you
we
know
have to
that
start somewhere.
you know that everybody knows it's happening anytime you feel like you have to change your pictures in your house and switch it around
Yeah.
for you to get
Yeah.
evaluated fairly. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
unknown known to everybody that this is happening.
Yeah, it's becoming very popular for
People
me in
people
real
have
estate
been
too.
telling me since we've been doing this, I need to change my picture behind me. So
But you know what I
I'm
find? Some people are like happy to move their personal artifacts because they feel like if that's going to help us to be able to achieve what we want to achieve, we'll remove everything. Like people are
but you shouldn't
fine.
have to
That's lunacy,
whitewash
though,
your
that you
house.
have to even do that. You know, that's
Yeah.
It
crazy in
should
the
be
system.
optional. It should be optional. And they recommend it in most marketing things to take the personal stuff out of the house, but nobody is penalized for it but black people. Or unfortunately, if you want to maximize your value, then you got to take down Shaft and Superfly. Well, you might be able to leave your Michael Jordan posters up. That seems to be universal. But for the most part, you got to take mom and them down.
And one of the things that I noticed also is it felt like they got offended that I questioned the mistakes that they made. And it changed from about the appraisal to who are you to confront me about my work?
It's
Sounds about
funny
right.
you should say that because
Sounds about
that goes
right.
to the subjective nature of the profession and the average age of profession. So if you look at over 65% of all appraisers are over 50 years old. Well, that generation, of course, that's our generation. You did what your parents said do because they said do it. The younger generation and the more modern generation demands transparency. And it's the same thing with the profession. There's no transparency. And so I used to coach a lot of the younger appraisers that it's not about being right, but it's about getting it right. So because we've been in such a hyper market, if somebody offers you some information that you may have not been privy to when you did the appraisal, then let's take a look at it. Let's just try to figure out getting it right. And that's what the reconsideration of value does and why it is the most fair process because it allows people like yourself, Terry, to be heard. But on the other hand, it allows the appraiser to be able to express his work without being accused of discrimination or bias. And I'm very sensitive to it because appraisers suffer from post traumatic stress disorder. The profession is under attack. But that being said, the profession has some culpability in the process as well. So, where they may have, the appraisers have to deal with outdated systemic, historic redlining, and other valuation policies that have been perpetuated over the years. Where I do not give the appraisal community a pass is in inclusion in the training. And so when you show up to the different organizations and they make you feel uncomfortable or you can't learn in an environment that's conducive for learning, there's no organization that advocates and educates Black and indigenous people. I equate it to imagine playing sports and you never get the opportunity to play a home game. Every game you play is away. Well, damn, the chances of you winning an away game are reduced significantly. You never get the benefit of the doubt. You never get the support that you need. Sometimes you just need to hear that. Go, Terry, go. If you got the home crowd behind you, that's worth at least 2 points, if you're playing in the game. So we've been able to try to create those opportunities. And we're not exclusionary. we open it up for everybody. We just want to make sure everybody has a chance, if you want it, to be able to succeed in this space.
And one of the other things I noticed that was critical is when you get to that point in the process and they tell you to uh, rebut their appraisal, you almost have to be an appraiser to understand and navigate through that process. And it's almost like they know once they put you in that arena, if you're not an appraiser, they gonna spin you. And so that's where
Well,
you became invaluable, because I was able to reach out to an expert appraiser to help me with that. And they were stunned when they got the report.
well,
You could
well, that's
just tell
part
them
of
to stop.
what we're able to do. But then again, that's the other thing why appraisers suffer from PTSD, is because everybody gets to grade or critique their appraisal, but they don't have to follow USPAP, Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. They get to use the AVM, they get to use the Zillow, they get to use every other tool that you can pull under the sun. So imagine being in a fight with one hand tied behind your back. That's what the appraisers are always up against. However, we don't jump to that. So in our service, not only are we representing the people, but we also offer peer review to the appraisers who feel like they've been discriminated against. We can articulate where they came up short, and what happened. And it's not always bias and discrimination. I promise you, 90% of the cases that I've reviewed have just been bad appraising, terrible appraising. Um, and again, back to your point, is how dare you question me? And that's the attitude of the industry, which has to change. We have to get towards transparency and, more importantly, accountability. So, between transparency and accountability, we can take this thing to a whole nother level and improve the quality of service and the opportunities available in the space.
And there was other tricks in the game that they had for me. They told me I could get another appraisal, but it was going to cost me more than the last one cost me. Then typically they don't change their mind. It was almost be a waste of money. And they tried to talk me out of it. But I
Well,
did it
under the
anyway.
reconsideration of value rules now, you don't have to pay for that second appraisal, but you have to go through the reconsideration of value process. And then they recommend whether the case goes to HUD or somewhere else, or discrimination file with the different states, which again is, we can mitigate a lot of that with the reconsideration of value. FHFA just recently did a paper within the last couple of months where it talked about over only 10% of all appraisals use the market conditions adjustment. Well, if only 10% use them, that means 90% didn't use them. So in that 90%, you can go a long way to assessing the market and whether or not an adjustment needs to be made to uplift the undervaluation. And in that, 90% of the appraisals in Black and brown communities, they didn't even acknowledge the market conditions adjustment, which compounded the undervaluation problem, which was acknowledged in this paper with FHFA that was made to the public, but has since been pulled from their website, along with, PAVE has been crashed. So there are a lot of things that have come out since you started on this journey, Terry, that is, you've been a big part of change. Now, whether or not you will be able to monetize that is a whole nother question, but you did start or have been a significant part of the transformation of this industry.
Yes.
Okay, can we finish the Terry Horton interview now? I mean, are you done? Do you have any questions for Shawnee? You know what I'm saying?
No, you can
And
go ahead and take over your show back.
okay, well, thank you. So, we will actually, matter of fact, we will be coming back to the area again, since I don't think we even talked about our appraisal apprenticeship program, which was another thing we have the first national appraisal apprenticeship program in the country certified through the Department of Labor, which is an outgrowth of what you started with this movement that we have been moving and following through. And we will be working and implementing our program, not in Cincinnati, but in the Dayton area. So we'll be working with Central State, and that's going to be pretty exciting. And that should be rolling out sometime this summer. So we're working with our partners in Dayton, the Dayton Board of Realtors, Central State University. We're really excited about being able to do that. And again, this is all a part of the outgrowth of what you started and our work in the space and how it's moving forward. So I will keep you posted when Shawnee and I will be in Dayton and at Central State. I believe it'll be sometime in April or May. We're working out the details now on that part of the implementation. And of course, we will be back in Cincinnati, but it's kind of like going to the club. We've been trying to dance with the girl who's trying to dance with us, and that's where we are with the project.
But I've recognized that, 10,000 KBA has been crisscrossing all across the country. I mean, I don't think he stopped since 2022.
We stopped. We had to take a break. Me and Shiny not as young as we used to be. So in that period, we had some slowdown, some startup. Had to get some rest, other obligations, and working. So we still have to work, and the goal is to be able to work to first help people like yourself with reconsideration of value, which we're doing with heirs property. We're doing it with farmers. We're doing it in the ag space. We're doing it with um, attorneys. It's been really a growth, and to be able to utilize that platform in order to fund the other training platform is where this whole thing is going, and excited to be able to do it again. I wish you had not made. I don't wish you had not made the call. You needed the help, and this is obviously what God had for us. But I was pretty much happy riding my bike and practicing yoga, working on my breathing techniques. Now I had to do it in the morning at the hotel when we're traveling. So um, it's we've met some amazing people, and one of the best times we had was uh, Shawnee. We went to the Short Hair Sheep Festival out in Oklahoma last year. So we
Yeah.
we were yeah, we
Mhm.
went to a blues festival, and that was it was incredible. And then some of the food that you get to experience at these farmers conferences that we attend, it is some of the best food that you could ever imagine. Not that we need to be eating, but we gotta eat. So
Sounds like barbecue.
all types of barbecue.
I
We had
know.
some barbecue at the Short Hair Sheep Festival. We had goat and all kind of other things. Uh, Shawnee got me in trouble when we was in Virginia, challenging me to get on the mechanical bull, and I think that was right after I had hip or knee surgery, and so I got in a little bit of trouble there. My wife had claimed I didn't have the sense God gave me climbing on the bull, and she was mad at
Trying to
everybody.
picture that.
You just had to do it. You had to. That was all on you. I didn't have anything to do with that.
I see you trying to throw me under the bus like I just, when nobody challenged me. But it was fun. But anyway, check us out on our podcast. Like, subscribe, share. Terry, if you have a vast network, if you could put us out there, like, subscribe, share. Keep us posted too with the outcomes and developments with your case. Um, So I know it was at HUD and at the Justice Department. Both of those are under new administration. So good luck with that.
Pray for me.
Fingers crossed that it'll work out. Yeah.
So until next week, and we will keep you all posted. Thanks. Again, we will see you.